Okay. All right. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Have attention, please. All quiet, please. Thank you. Welcome. Yeah, we're like full. So this video is, of course, going out to those who are still at home or who are not able to. And by the way, and this worked out okay, I think, because some of you guys, you're like, well, I only go on blue days, or I only go on green days. And so it's okay. So sometimes you would zoom in, which is cool, because that way you would get it like simultaneous and so forth. Because some of you guys, I don't know if Mary Garrett or Quinn, if you guys ever zoomed in, but Julian, I think Landon, and you zoomed in on occasion, which is fine. Wait, Tara's not here either. This isn't going to work out. It's not going to work if everyone comes. Yeah. Anyway, we'll have to get rid of COVID so that we can all be back together again. Yeah. You'll have the same issue because it's my class and Mrs. Rao's class are the big ones. I think all the other ones are like weird. Anyway, so today we're going to continue on where we left off. All right? So in your notes, right? We're getting into, and this is actually a very important one, episode 22, Star Wars, okay? I've got notes. I've got some video clips for you, right? And we continue moving on forward. This actually, the Cold War part of this unit is going to wrap up fairly quickly. And the remainder is going to be like, other 20th century wars like the Falklands, Malvinas War. You're like, what? That's where Margaret Thatcher gets her Iron Lady. Don't mess with Maggie. The Iran-Iraq War, the Persian Gulf War. Okay? And then from that, we continue on, right? Livy, what do we do after that? It's like, I'm looking, it's like, you get the 6-foot stare, yeah. We're going to go into genocide, McKinley says. Are you looking forward to that? Sure, yes, yeah, buckle up. Yeah, genocide is coming. And also, for those of you in a particular situation, I think I'm looking at 1, 2, 3. Apparently, is this when EE jail starts? Yeah. Okay, so get out of EE jail. If you're one of mine and you are, get it into me so that we can have the conversation. Get me, I think you've got a draft. Didn't you have a draft? Yeah. Send that in to me so that I can look at that and give you the feedback and whatever, so that you can get that part wrapped up. Okay? If that's the case. Right? Oh, and that's for me too? That's, okay, good. Yeah, no, and I want to see. I want to see. Okay. No. I mean, that's, yeah, it's between us. All right? Oh, by the way, some people came in and they're like, oh, I didn't notice anything different because the symmetry hasn't changed. It's still symmetrical. We've got Joe Biden on there, and we added, because our country had a do-over, right? We had a do-over. We started out with the Articles of Confederation. That didn't go so well, and so, in homage to John Hanson, I need to put a bigger picture there. But yeah, there's the presidents of the Articles of Confederation. They didn't have real power, which is why they're not really well known, but our national government wasn't as powerful back then. Hello, that was designed, but then we made it more powerful, and we have real presidents ever since then. Yes. I won't be here. And so we're also hoping for Joe Biden's good health so that he has complete 4 years in his presidency. We don't have to do like what happened, what was it, after William Henry Harrison? I mean, they went straight to Tyler after like just over a month because he got pneumonia and died. They went straight for his vice president. That would mess things up, wouldn't it, Frank? If I had to put the first female president of the United States there, number 47, if it was as a result of Joe Biden not able to be, doing a 4-year term or 8 years or whatever. It's the symmetry. That's why some people last semester were like, I'm for Trump, not because of his policies or anything else, just so that Mr. Hansen doesn't have to change his, wall display. I mean, like, whatever. Yeah, but are you guys okay with the symmetry? Don't be like that one student who's like, it's not aligned with the bookcase. Oh my gosh, I'm still feeling. Nothing's aligned. I mean, good grief. I got stuff all over the place. Although this is pretty well aligned, I think. I don't know. Yes, quickly. No. Just kidding. I'm sorry. What was your suggestion? Do you want me to change U.S. history?
What? That's not changing it, though.
Yeah, it is. It reads left to right.
I know.
We started with the Articles of Confederation. We had our first president of the United States, John Hanson. We had our next president of the United States, those guys. And then we had our Constitution. And then our first president of the United States under the Constitution is George Washington. 1, 2, 3, 4. What do you want to like do math differently and count it like this way and that way sometimes? And what kind of math is that?
It would just be like two corner pieces and then like a header of presidents. And then it's
How many of you guys vote in favor of Julian's suggestion? Up. Okay. Motion carries. Motion fails. Lack of a second. All right. Other quick comments because I want to get right into this. But nice suggestion. I understand the lack because those things bother me too. So I know. It was very white. It needed to be sort of more off-white. I don't know. Just wait. It doesn't make any difference to you guys because I'm here for the rest of you. Yeah. Okay? Of course you're curious. Well, we'll see. Okay, you guys ready? Other questions, comments, concerns? Okay. All right, here we go. This is very, very cool, very, very important because we're as we go through these parts here, we're starting to look as we go through the end of the Cold War at why did the Cold War end this way, right? Write it down. Why did the Cold War end? Because we're getting into the tail end of the Cold War. Although, I tell you what, sometimes the darkest hours are just before dawn. I'm quoting somebody else. During the Cold War, some of the most dangerous times were in the latter stages of the Cold War. So, for example, when I was in college, and I was taking classes, studying government history and so forth, studying the Soviet system and getting ready to go actually to the Soviet Union in 1985 in the summer, there were some tough years there. There were some times when people actually thought, oh my gosh, we could be like, going to war with these guys, which would be really stupid. Because they would shoot a lot of weapons at us, and we would shoot a lot of weapons at them, and it would be really bad. And yet, by the time we finish Reagan's second term, it looks like the Cold War is beginning to wrap up. And the Berlin Wall comes down in 1989. The Cold War is over in 1991, like officially. But it wraps up. And so you ask the question, why did it turn out that way? Here's some answers. Write it down. Reagan. Here's another answer. Gorbachev. So we're going to look at things associated with those two people. Okay? Now, Reagan wasn't the absolute last leader of the United States in the Cold War, but a lot of key things are going to happen during his 8-year administration. And then, of course, Gorbachev. He is going to be the last leader of the Soviet Union. We could look at some other things we mentioned last time. That war in Afghanistan for the Soviets, did that work out very well for them? It was like their Vietnam. I mean, our Vietnam knocked us down a peg. That's going to hit them hard, but is it ultimately like a sole cause for the Soviets losing the Cold War? No. But it's part of that decline that is taking place in the Soviet Union. We're going to look at some other kinds of things as we go through, including, yes, Mr. Hansen is the cause of the end of the Cold War. You're like, what? And that only makes sense in the context of the very little teeny tiny thing that I did to help somebody who was part of an effort that is really only possible because of Gorbachev. And you guys, many of you remember this from the 10th grade. Was Gorbachev a hard-line communist leader like Stalin, or was he more chill? He was more chill, and he introduces things like democracy into the Soviet Union, introduces things like capitalism, introduces concepts like free speech. Now, he will crack down at times, but he's going to be nowhere near the kind of folks that we've seen previously. Lenin, and Stalin, Khrushchev, Brezhnev, leaders who were like, oh, we need to send in the military? Okay, fine. Crack down. Budapest, 1956. Prague, 1968. Gdansk in Poland in 1981. Okay, or 1980, 1981. Yeah. So here we go. We got Reagan coming in. So there's a big focus on this, and he's going to be a real key part of here. Write his down. He's a Republican. I mean, hello. I should probably, if I were to do this over again, I would probably add, a little letter next to each of the president's names. So in fact, folks didn't remember, Joe Biden, D, Donald Trump, R, Barack Obama, D, R, D, R. 2 Republicans in a row with Reagan and George H.W. Bush. He's a conservative Republican. And think of this. He is hard on the Soviet Union. And if you're like, wow, that's a first for America during the Cold War. I mean, who else was hard on the Soviet Union during the Cold War as far as American presidents? Harry Truman? Dwight D. Eisenhower? Kennedy? Johnson? Nixon? Yeah, I mean, even Jimmy Carter was like, yeah, I'm not going to sell you grain after what you did in Afghanistan, or we're not going to send our Olympic athletes over. But he's got an interesting thing. Write it down. He's the great communicator. His background is in movies and television. But it's an interesting thing. He comes into the presidency, let's say, unlike Trump. When Trump came in, what political office had Trump held before that? None. Yeah, I mean, he was a businessman, and he was probably most well known for television appearances on his series, The Apprentice. Right? I don't know if you guys ever saw The Apprentice. It's like a reality TV-like thing, and you compete doing business kinds of things, and then it gets narrower and narrower. And what was the key phrase that Trump issued after the group got smaller by one? No, that's his political. You're fired. Yeah, you're fired. So if you ever see the meme, America to Trump, you're fired, whatever, Trump would say to one of the contestants, you're fired. And then finally there would be a winner. I think there was some guy from the Boise area that ended up being the winner of The Apprentice one season. Anyway. But Reagan's background, put this down. He previously served as governor of the state of California. Okay? He'd run for president before. He ran against Gerald Ford for the Republican nomination in 1976. And he did pretty well. He actually ran for president a little bit in 1960, I want to say it was in 68. He was looking into running for president and so forth. But he is going to get his due. And in 1980, he gets the Republican nomination in a highly contested competition, and he beats an incumbent president. When was the last time an incumbent president was beaten running for re-election? Okay, that happened very recently. When was the last time before that? Yeah, about 8 years ago. George H.W. Bush was defeated. We'll actually talk about that. He was defeated running for re-election by Bill Clinton. Okay? Jimmy Carter, things aren't doing so well. Hostage crisis, malaise, difficult economic situation. Reagan comes in, and put this down. He's got this sort of sunny atmosphere. Exudes confidence. Now, his critics will be like, he exudes confidence and he doesn't know what he's talking about. His supporters loved it. He exuded confidence. He's like, I think America is going to have great days. We're a shining city on a hill. I mean, that's why they call him a great communicator. His opponents get frustrated that way because he could sort of rally, to the cause. But very, very much mind on the let's get tough with the Soviet Union. We saw last time I played at the very end his speech where he literally called the Soviet Union, what word? Evil. Yeah. I mean, that's not just saying, oh, we have ideological differences, they're very far left. And no, he's like, these guys are evil. You need to stop them. And so one of the things that he institutes, make sure you write this down because this is going to be a big component of his presidency. And it actually started with Carter. Increased military defense spending. Increased military defense spending. And not just more of the same. In Reagan's administration, he's going to look and go, okay, what do you got that's going to give us some advantages here? Here's one, write it down. The B-1 bomber. Okay? The B-1 bomber. The latest long-distance bomber. Eventually, we'll be getting into, because it's new at the time. Raise your hand if you can explain. In fact, I'm going to ask Jackson. You're pretty good on aircraft and stuff like that. What does stealth technology mean in aircraft? Do you know? Stealth technology. Like a stealth fighter or a stealth bomber. Are you aware of that? If you're not, it's okay.
What do you mean?
So like if there's a bomber that has stealth aspects to it, what can it do that like a regular old-fashioned bomber can't do?
I'm not exactly sure. I'm assuming it's kind of like it's harder to detect on radar.
Yeah, exactly. That's how it works. Perfect. Write that down. Love it. That's basically it. Yeah, so it's like, you guys remember like World War II, the British were using radar to detect incoming things and so forth. I mean, you ping and you hit the thing and so forth. But because of the angles and so forth, American engineers and so forth had designed stealth fighter aircraft, stealth bomber aircraft, so they were much harder to detect. So it gave us some advantages in that way. Put this down. The United States is going to be putting a lot of money into some really new technological advances. And the Soviets, part of the reason that people look to as why the Soviets lost, they have a hard time paying to keep up. Write that down. They have a hard time, the Soviets, paying to get the research and development of these new sophisticated weapon systems that the United States is pursuing. You understand that? I mean, if you have to compete in life with somebody else and you can't pay for, think of it this way, over the next 4 years, after 4 years' time, you're going to be competing with somebody else for a job. But you couldn't afford to or chose not to, whatever, go get that necessary like education prerequisite for that job. Who's going to have an advantage in that situation? They would. Yeah. So the Soviets are going to be hampered during this time period because their economy sucks. Write it down. If you didn't have that written down in your notes already, Soviet economy sucks. It's not that good. Why is it not working out as well as they'd hoped it to? Because the government plans for everything, but when the government plans for everything, there's something missing that doesn't lend to growth in an economy. It's that missing component as far as like the people part of it, right? Landon, do you want to make money when you finish your education? Do you want to make other people money? Do you want to earn what you earn? Do you want to just commit right now that all of your earnings go to the benefit of all your classmates? Okay. Will they actually benefit as being part of the United States as far as like the taxes you have to pay? Sure, write that down. Our advances in military are paid for by taxpayer dollars. And we also borrow money. Sometimes we borrow a lot of money, but yeah. It's like, I don't want to pay for that. We'll just keep borrowing money. That's what we've been doing. From whoever thinks it's a good investment in the United States of America. If the United States of America borrows money, do they pay it back? Yes, with interest. And then we borrow more. Oh yeah, we've got a lot. But it helps us get through difficult times like World War II and stuff. Have we borrowed a lot of money over the last year? Heck yeah. Yeah. Have you felt it yet? No. Have you felt the benefit of it? Have your families? I think so, yeah. I mean, because I think without that, some of the hardship of the quarantine and COVID and yada, yada, yada would probably have hit a little bit harder. Are you going to feel the benefit of all the money you borrow to go to college? I hope so. Are you going to pay it off? Yeah, the banks are a little bit more tricky about that. They're like, yeah, you have to. You're not the United States government. In order to get more loans to pay off the previous ones, you have to have the ability to actually have a job. So it's like, I remember one of the first jobs I had out of law school, I was working with this one guy, and he had a really expensive law school education, borrowed a lot of money, and he's like, I want to work like in the public sector, helping out poor people and so forth. But it doesn't pay well enough, so he ended up having to work like in a law firm that paid a lot more money in order to pay off his loans. No, I mean, it was weird. He was like, yeah. So he was kind of bound in that sense because he owed so much. He had to do that, right? I mean, let me see, doctors come out of med school with huge expenses. Let me see, what kind of line of work are they probably going to be able to do in order to pay off those loans? Yeah, be a doctor. What if they all of a sudden said, I don't know, I just want to be a poet? Good luck. But poets generally don't make that much money. So anyway, so the United States, put this down, the United States is going to be able to pay for more because our economy, not perfect, but compared to the Soviet Union in the 1980s, is doing better. And so you're going to see a gap. We're going to be able to pay for more. Now, we're going to have huge debates in our country as to whether or not we should pay for this or pay for that, or should we invest in this, or should we invest in Star Wars technology, okay? But there's a clear message from the administration. Reagan, and write it down, his Secretary of Defense, you've seen him already in a previous video, Caspar Weinberger, he's the Secretary of Defense for the United States, on the same page as Reagan, sees the Soviets as being a threat, sees them as being aggressive. Let me see, what's a good example of the Soviets being aggressive? Afghanistan. Okay, they sent their military into a neighboring country that didn't have very much of the military in there before. Yeah. Yep, for Reagan. And here's the thing. This is a fascinating thing. We were also developing a kind of technology at that time that the Soviets really lacked. And a lot of the developments were taking place in the private sector. Computer technology, write it down. The late 70s and into the 1980s, computer technology. And if you look at like the computers that were being developed in the 1980s, you're like, oh, that's so cute. Look at those big bulky things and so forth. You know, Jobs and Apple computer and all these other ones and IBM. And you know, it all looks so quaint and so forth. Let me see. What were they developing in the Soviet Union? Nothing comparative. And here's the thing about computer technology. It's available to the public, and you better believe there's contracts for the military as well. They're starting to put more computer technology into components of the military system. And here's the thing. If the United States military is looking to hire people with backgrounds in computer technology that can do the job, is there enough Americans that know how to do it? Heck yeah. Yeah, and usually it's among the younger people. Write this down. The Soviet Union, they didn't have that. They didn't have that private sector computer industry. They didn't have any private sector computer industry. And they also had lack of computer literacy among the general population. And make sure you write this down. The Soviets were not really interested in having their population become super computer literate. Certainly not literate like on an internet kind of a way. You know what I'm talking about? You guys want to find out something, you get on the internet, you Google this, you search this, you find this, and so forth, you become much more knowledgeable. Whew. Does the Soviet Union want that? No. This is one of those misnomers because in the early stages of computer literacy and the internet, the idea was it's open. Western societies, open societies, have the best opportunity and best advantage of the internet. It's no difficulty in a Western society to have the internet because we're already openly communicating with each other. Do you understand that? Why were the Soviets leery of that? Did they want to open up their society? No, they didn't. The thinking was if you have an internet, you're going to have an open society. That was the thinking back then, yeah. So what was that again? Well, here's the thing. I mean, if you, and I don't know if I'm answering the question and so forth, but if you look at, like right now, does China have an internet? Is China afraid that the people are communicating too openly with each other? Well, I don't know if they're afraid about it, but they do everything they can to monitor it. And they do monitor it very carefully. Yeah. So, I mean, that's why I say, looking at the initial stages of the internet and so forth, it had a real freedom aspect to it. I hope that your internet experience over the rest of your life in free countries like the United States of America doesn't end up the way it is for the average Chinese person. Because if they want to operate and communicate with a wide variety of different people, they have to use all kinds of like coded language and all kinds of various different things to evade government detection. Yeah, that's what, in China? In the Soviet Union? This is going to be pre-Gorbachev. Yeah, so this would be like Brezhnev, and then we'll have two that will be like right after him in quick succession, Andropov and Chernenko. We'll see those guys coming in. Gorbachev's going to be more open to free speech and things like that and so forth. But when we're talking about the early 80s, this is one of the distinctions between the Soviet Union and the United States. We're just starting to develop internet. The Soviets aren't really interested in that. What advantages do we have from that? Well, one, we're going to have a lot of tech-savvy people going into the military and workforce. In the Soviet Union, you're not going to have that so much. Yes. Why don't you come sit over here, Daniel? We're full. Because, I don't know, I don't even have a... Oh, there's a chair. Actually, do you want to give him the chair so that you can sit right in the corner? Okay. I mean, there's a corner. Sorry, where were we? What, Gorbachev? I'm not sure I'm following the question. That would be in the Soviet Union during the time of Brezhnev and the subsequent leaders. Because do they have an open society as far as letting the people communicate? No. They don't want that. If you go to Soviet news media sources, they will give the party line. Right? If you read Soviet news media sources about like the war in Afghanistan, it was all rosy. If you wanted to find out what really was going on in the war of Afghanistan, you talked to veterans who had come home who were telling you, things aren't as rosy as they're reported in the newspapers. So you couldn't rely on the accuracy of things in the news. It's kind of like, well, can you rely on the accuracy of the internet today? No, but you have a lot of information available to you. And there's the challenge of trying to sort out what is the most truthful. Okay? Yeah. Okay, so here we go. Soviet Union. If the United States is spending more on weapons, they have to. Write it down. They're going to have to do that. I mean, it's in their own strategic interests. But it puts a real crimp because if they put more money into the military and technology and so forth, then they have even less to put into other components of their economy, like consumer goods. We've seen this before. You put it all into science and technology and military, you have less available for the customers for consumer goods. Their farming system is very inefficient. They're not able to get the full bang of production from the land because they've got an inefficient farming system. These are going to be challenges for the Soviet Union throughout the 1980s. And they start even before that time period. Now, people look at Reagan. Write this down. Reagan is going to have his critics in the United States and in Europe. Okay? They will listen to his language about being a warmonger. They'll look at his policies advocating spending more money, and they will call him a warmonger. They'll say, man, you're making things more dangerous. And other people are like, no, he's just standing up for a stronger United States. So we have these very vigorous debates. I remember them when I was in college. People are like, yeah, Reagan, you're doing the right thing. And other people are like, no, you're going to make it more dangerous. Here's one movement that took place in Europe, Western Europe. The Freeze movement. Write it down. The Freeze movement. It's an anti-nuclear weapons movement. Okay? And you would have, particularly from the left political elements in, West Germany and France and Britain and so forth, they were concerned that tension in the Cold War was more likely to cause war. And more weapons meant more likelihood of war. And so they wanted to have policies in their countries to have U.S. weapons removed. Got that? They wanted to have U.S. weapons removed, or do not put in like short-range or medium-range U.S. missiles. And this is a very, very vigorous debate that's going on. And you have massive protests. Can you have a massive protest in West Germany for the Freeze movement, anti-nuclear? Yeah, it's a free country. How about in Britain? Mm-hmm. In fact, it got really weird. I remember the very first time I left the United States and went over to Europe was in 1984. I went to visit Britain. Part of the time that I was there was visiting family, and it was really weird because there was an election. Not a big national election. It was like a one-off. There was like an open seat in the parliament at the constituency, the district, that my uncle and aunt lived in northern England. It was really weird. And to think about it, in Britain, you don't have to live in that area to actually run for office there. So all the attention in Britain was on this little seat, right, that was going on in this election. And they had a conservative candidate, right, the right-wing political party in Britain. And you had a Labour Party candidate, which would be the left wing, and they were more like anti-nuclear U.S. missiles and so forth. And then you had a break-off because the British Labour Party had a split. They were called the Social Democrats at the time. And her name was Shirley Williams, and she was representing that district, and she was running for re-election. And she was supported, okay, give you like a cultural reference. How many of you guys have seen Jurassic Park? Okay, all right. The old guy who took the dinosaur DNA out of the amber, remember that? Right? That role is played by Richard Attenborough. Okay, Richard Attenborough, who's an actor, he's also a director. He directed the movie Gandhi. Anyway, he came to speak on behalf of Shirley Williams in a local town hall meeting. My aunt actually took me there, and so I was like, oh, this will be interesting because, John's interested in politics and yada, yada, yada. So we came there, and they actually had a question and answer session for Shirley Williams, this nationwide, well-known candidate. And if you wanted to ask her a question, you wrote it down on a piece of paper and submitted it. Well, I wrote down a question on a piece of paper and submitted it. And my question was drawn from the mix. And so they asked the people who had their question if they would read their question. And so here he is, this young punk American college student, getting up in the midst of all of these British, suburbanites. Yeah, suburbanites, because it was kind of like a suburb district. And I read my question. No, I don't have a video. I have a memory. I have this story. This is your story. Here's the question. I am trying to recreate it. I'm standing up. And in an American accent, I asked Shirley Williams if she favored the removal of U.S. Pershing missiles. And I pronounced it that way. Missiles. No, I didn't do it wrong, because if they're made in America, they're called missiles. If they're implemented in Britain, I suppose you could call them missiles, right? Like you've heard it over and over again in the thing. And so it was fascinating, because when I read my question, it was a legitimate question and so forth, and all these people were like, American, because they could tell that I was not one of them because of my accent. I'm not one of them. They're like, American, missiles. And I kind of knew the answer, but she gave me the answer. And I really appreciated Shirley Williams, because when she gave me the answer, to my best recollection, and there's no video to counter this, she answered using the pronunciation in the same way I pronounced it. She said that she was in favor of keeping the missiles there. Right? So that was part of the reason why her and others in the Labour Party had broken off. There was a big active debate. And within the Labour Party, most of them said, we want to get those U.S. missiles out. They're too dangerous. They were like pro-free. But Shirley Williams, she's like, no, I think there's more strength in being, part of the American commitment and having forward-based nuclear missiles there. No, I'm not famous. I just, you would do the same thing. You go someplace and you're like, oh, I think I'll just jump into the debate. So, it's no surprise that later one is like, hey, can you buy me some guitar strings? I'm participating in the singing revolution against the Soviet Union. I'm like, yeah, I can do that. That's easy. No, I was born in America. No, I'm born in America. You don't even have dual citizenship as if you were born in Britain. And because you were born in America, but anyway, yeah, so you can talk to her about her. I was born to My mom was British at the time, and I don't think she'd gotten her citizenship yet. But my dad was American, so anyway. So that was that. Okay? So here's the deal. Write this down. This is very important. This is an important fact. Ronald Reagan hated MAD. Write it down. Ronald Reagan was not mad about MAD.
He hated it, but he wasn't mad about it.
He was against it. Mutual assured destruction, Reagan didn't like it. And if you guys remember, it's like when we talked about mutual assured destruction, it's like, this is a good thing. As in the sense that like both sides have so many weapons pointed at each other that even if one of them got off a first strike, the other still had the capability of firing back, and therefore massive casualties and obliteration of life on both sides. So therefore, what is the wonderful thing about MAD? Therefore, don't fire, because if everybody loses if you go to war, therefore, don't go to war. Does mutual assured destruction provide security and lack of nuclear war? Yes, according to, Reagan didn't like it. Write it down. Reagan didn't like it. I'll tell you why. Reagan didn't like it. Reagan didn't like it. Reagan was like, if you can do something to prevent them from hitting you in a first strike, then that's better. Make sure you have that down. Reagan was like, if you can prevent them from hitting you in a first strike, then you don't have to rely on the idea that you would fire a retaliatory strike. And of course, then you back up the logic. They'll never fire at us first because that would be stupid. I mean, I remember at the time Sting from the Police, right? He did a song, The Russians Love Their Children Too. I mean, he was basically like putting in song form the idea that they're not stupid. They're not going to like kill themselves by going to war with us, and we wouldn't want to do the same thing either. Yeah. Oh yeah. I'm just getting started. I'm just getting started. Yeah, Garrett, you're totally onto this line of thinking, okay? So, yeah. Not everyone agreed with him, even within like the Republican Party, okay? And Democrats, a lot of them didn't agree with him. But let's get Reagan's ideas put forth, because he is the President of the United States, and so that's an important position in our government. He's the President of the United States, and he doesn't like the deterrence from mutual assured destruction. What would he like instead? Write it down. You ready? Strategic Defense Initiative. You got that, Jackson? The Strategic Defense Initiative, sometimes referred to as SDI. This would be, and you guys are going to pick up on this right away because you're like, oh, wow, we have something like that. But in the 1980s, it was new. It was like this new visionary high-tech thing. You're like, oh, right, visionary high-tech. The promise is great, but the actual performance and how long it takes to actually get there. Strategic Defense Initiative, here's the deal. What Reagan wanted was the ability of the United States to shoot down all incoming missiles, like an umbrella, a perfect defense against incoming missiles. That, Reagan said, would give us real security, as opposed to the hope, which I think is justified, that the Soviets would never attack us because that would be suicide for them. Do you understand that? That was his thinking. And he said it was, to use very value-laden words, it was immoral for us to hope that we could be secure on a threat of retaliation, which is all part of mutual assured destruction. Okay, but do you see the problem there? So Reagan wanted to, and got a fair amount of money from the United States Congress. There was all kinds of vigorous debates, but they got money, put it down. We got money to spend on the initial phases of this very expensive, high-tech endeavor. Do you understand that? And you can imagine some of the things, it's like laser technology, kind of shooting down things in the sky. Of course, the problem is, what if you miss something? I mean, if they send one missile over, I got that. Now they send 10 over. we've got all but one is a nuclear missile that blew up a city. Goodbye, Houston. I mean, it's like, that's, and you're like, well, what if they send over 100? I mean, how many nuclear missiles does both sides have? Thousands. So, I mean, the margin of error is like none. Yeah, you never. Here's what his critics call it, right? His critics are like, oh, dude, you've seen one too many George Lucas movie. Because in George Lucas movies, they've got all kinds of computer-generated like imagery and so forth. Exactly. That's what the critics call it. Write it down. They called it Star Wars.
Oh wait, so Star Wars movies were around at this time?
Yeah, Star Wars. The very first Star Wars was not called Episode 4, The New Hope. It was called Star Wars, and it came out like in, 1976, something like that. And then the next one came out like a few years after that. So yeah, Star Wars was a thing. And I want to say the first 3 wrapped up by the time I was out of high school or into college. So yeah, Star Wars was a thing. And it was a big cultural thing. And it was a huge thing. Everyone knew it was that. But they all knew it was all like movie fantasy stuff. So, I mean, that's what the critics are saying. Reagan, this is too expensive. Write it down. It's too expensive. It's not proven. Oh, and by the way, it's going to freak the Soviets out. And that's dangerous. Lenny, you know why it's dangerous to freak the Soviets out? We're going to play a game. Let's play a game. I'll show you the clip from War Games later on. That was a 1983, 1980s movie. Let's play a game. All right. You're the Soviet Union. You got a crap economy, but you need to be like, defense. What is keeping you safe from me? I'm the United States.
A big bomb.
Right. Okay, now I'm just about to, ready? I'm just about to implement a fully functioning SDI. And the day before my SDI goes into effect to completely make yours missiles useless, what is he going to do? Write that down. That's why people said it's dangerous, because it actually increases the likelihood of war that the Soviets might fire off their missiles before they become obsolete. Do you understand that?
I don't know, that didn't happen, so.
We'll save that for the next episode. The next episode. Yeah, tomorrow. Okay? Next time. And if you, it's going to be kind of tight. I'll see how it works in English class and so forth. But you're welcome to Zoom in. And hopefully at some point everyone will just be safe. And then it doesn't matter. But anyway. All right. So wipe down. For those of you guys who haven't been here, what we do, the drill is you take one of those little wipey things and you wipe down your desk.